This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 612 of the Dressage Radio Show, official podcast of the United States Dressage Federation on the Horse Radio Network, brought to you by Kentucky Performance Products, Bates Saddles, Han Plastics, and TotalSaddleFit.com. On tonight's USDF show, we will be joined by Cindi Wylie, who tells us what she learned by becoming a USDF FEI level certified instructor. And as a special treat, we will be joined by Sabine Schut-Kery, who shares her story with us. After that, we've got a great tip with Bill McMullin.
This is Reese Koffler-Stanfield from Georgetown, Kentucky.
And this is Philip Parks from Rockwood, Ontario, and you're listening to the Dressage Radio Show. Well, welcome home, Reese.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. It's so, we love our time in Florida. It is great. We had a great season, but there's something about coming home that's just wonderful. And Kentucky in the spring. Phil, you usually come and visit us in the spring because it's that nice
it's
here.
So beautiful. Yeah. And do you have all the blossoms out yet?
They're coming out and it's so green. Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
Have you been over to Keeneland? Are they running races at Keeneland?
Yeah, but I'm not seeing a lot of mask wearing. So I'm just seeing some pictures. So they are running, I think, limited capacity. But I've not gone over. For sure. But my brother came down, and my nieces and my sister-in-law. And so I actually did take, I've been here in town and I rode my horses, but I have taken a little time off just to spend some family time. I haven't really seen them in a year, and it was great. And Easter with the kiddos is so fun. And we had a lovely time. So it's been a very nice kind of get back into routine. We were laughing. My main man, Bingo, I was trying to give him a little time off, but he wanted to work. So and again, I think you'll love that because later in the show, we'll talk to Sabine Schut-Kery and she'll talk a little bit about keeping a Grand Prix horse fit. It's a little different. They're so used to their routine. He was not having time off. So even if you just get on him and mentally, even just walk for 20, 30 minutes. He didn't like it when he didn't get the time off situation. So we enjoyed just some hacking. And the weather's been great. So not the day we arrived. The day we arrived, it snowed, but then it's leveled out and it was absolutely gorgeous for Easter. And it's been really nice. Fantastic. So it's been nice to be home. So yeah, really good.
Awesome. But well, I think we'll just actually have to jump right to the show unless you've got.
We have a big show tonight.
Yeah.
No, we have a big show tonight.
But it was great to do the recording with our guests, and I think this is. I don't want to oversell it. So
yeah, we don't want to oversell, but we think you're going to like the show. So we're going to get right into it after this break from the USDF and also Kentucky Performance Products with newly certified USDF certified instructor Cindi Rose Wylie.
Founded in 1973, the United States Dressage Federation has become the largest organization to represent a single Olympic equestrian discipline. At nearly 30,000 members strong, USDF is your connection to dressage education, competition, and achievement. Visit USDF.org to learn more about USDF education, competition and award programs, and to shop our online store. Again, that's USDF.org, your online destination for dressage.
This Nutrition Minute is brought to you by Kentucky Performance Products, the company that simplifies your search for research-proven nutritional supplements at kppusa.com.
The horse that matters to you matters to Kentucky Performance Products. Researchers have confirmed that as horses age, they naturally become less sensitive to insulin and more susceptible to health problems caused by too much sugar in the diet. One way to reduce the sugar content in a horse's diet is to replace sugar-laden grains with a high-fat supplement. Fat is an extraordinary energy source. It is readily utilized by the horse and contains more than 2 times the calories of sugary grains. Equijewel Stabilized Rice Bran is an excellent fat supplement. It contains a balanced calcium to phosphorus ratio and won't cause mineral imbalances when added to the diet. Its all-natural ingredients are high in healthy fat and fiber. Best of all, Equijewel allows owners to easily replace the calories previously supplied by sugary grains. When you need to add healthy calories to your horse's diet, choose Equijewel. To learn more, visit Kentucky Performance Products at kppusa.com.
Well, tonight we are very excited to have one of the brand newest FEI USDF certified instructor. She is a large R judge and an S judge candidate, and she is an FEI rider and trainer at Quarterline Dressage at Rosebrook Farm. Cindi Rose Wylie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Reese.
Oh, well, we know this test. We've been highlighting the candidates that became FEI certified instructors because it is a very difficult exam, and we wanted to celebrate you guys and what you did. And you have a great kind of tip on what you learned during the process of becoming a FEI certified instructor. So we'll just get started. How does that sound?
Sure. It's like you said, it's been a journey. I've actually been on this journey since '99. When I first started with the program. A lot of things came to light along the way. You pick up things about teaching, training. There's a lot of knowledge to be learned through the program. The one thing that's really stuck out in my mind, the one thing I think I've brought home the most is ways to be a more effective instructor, as well as ways to teach a more effective lesson.
Well, that sounds good. I mean, let's get started. I need to know all of this stuff here.
Yeah, we need refreshers.
Hopefully I do it all justice. So to be a more effective, to be a good instructor in dressage, I think first and foremost is having good horsemanship skills. I do worry sometimes that barn rats seem to be a dwindling commodity. You know, I remember the days of just hanging out in the barn, just watching, just learning everything I could about horses. But it also goes above and beyond just the horseman, just the hands-on kind of and the riding sort of stuff. Part of good horsemanship is learning to respect all students and all horses. We have to recognize as instructors that not everybody is bound for the Olympics. Not every rider wants or even is even suited to ride that big, fancy, moving warm blood. Some people just want to enjoy the journey with their horse, and it can be a fairly average horse with limitations, but they can still have a great time and learn a lot from it if we work with them correctly. The horse clearly needs to be sound, and having 3 clear gaits really helps. But if they're happy with their riding and their progress, then I think we as instructors owe it to them to be happy for them too. Part of my personal journey in dressage has opened my eyes to the part that every horse doesn't have to move like totalists or even half that.
Mm-hmm. That's such a great way to say that, because I think as you maybe get older, us on the call, where I wouldn't say that any of us, sorry, Phil, are young instructors anymore. I feel like we've been doing this a long time. And I think you learn that on your journey, right? And that is, I have students that, and I think maybe the pandemic helped me with that as an instructor. A lot of people came to the barn to just spend time with their horse. And a lot of them, I saw them, they had a little extra time probably because they weren't going anywhere. They didn't have to run off somewhere. And I saw so many people just enjoying being with their horses. And me too. I was able to have a little extra time. Where was I going? So I live at my facility, so I could spend time and hand graze my horses and spend some extra time with them. And that really did get me thinking on how important it is to, number one, sort of know why you're doing what you're doing yourself. But I think it's also really helpful from the instructor standpoint to, like you said, recognize what each student wants to do. But I do think that is a way that students should also do that with their instructors, right? Like, it's okay to voice your goals. And if it is your goal to work on your horse standing better in the cross ties or whatever it may be, it's good to voice that to your instructor, because we can only work on communication from you as a student, or we can have our own ideas on what we think you should do. But I think just being able to voice that is really important from the student, but also from the instructor, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, exactly. And the instructor has to be empathic towards those things. Sometimes the instructor has to be able to read things that aren't voiced. Be a little bit sensitive to, hey, she's not enjoying this aspect of it. What can we do to make her more comfortable with the time she's spending with her horse?
That can change over time, or it can change from one week to the next. But I think the two-way communication is just a really important point that you guys are making here. And, I certainly don't, like, I'm a really driven person, and I have big goals, and I want to, but I can't show up every day at the barn with the same sort of enthusiasm, because there's a lot of other things going on in our lives. So, I mean, we need to listen to people that, and people need to talk about, like what they want to accomplish next month, but maybe just what they want to accomplish that day. Because this hobby for 99% of the people, it's a hobby. Has to be fun first and foremost, and that can be hard from to communicate and to understand from an instructor. And I think most are kind of competitive and goal driven and all that. So I'm really liking this conversation.
Yeah, well, and I think you touched on some of the other aspects of a good horse person, the compassion, the empathy. There's also this sense of humor and humility, which you just talked about. I can't come the same day, with the same enthusiasm every day. And there are times, let's face it, horses are humbling. We're going to feel frustration. We're going to be frustrated in maybe our own inabilities to get something across to the student. Well, what better time than just blow off some steam and crack a joke? Lighten the load a little bit so that they don't sense your anxiety about what's not happening. Patience, exactly. Things take time. This dressage is definitely a process. And the horse that might not stand on cross ties today, 6 months from now, might ground tie. So you have to realize that and how many times do you have a student come in the ring and see, for example, the horse is hanging on the left rein. Oh, well, he's always hung on the left rein. Well, you as an instructor know that it's the progressive exercises we're going to use to fix that. It's not always going to be that way. And I think that's part of our job too, helping the student understand that part of this journey is helping them change the rideability of their horse.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, as when as an instructor and a student, there are times, again, recently and during the pandemic, I've learned this. There are times it's okay if you don't want to come out. Let's say you have a lesson. A lot of us will teach students every day or multiple times a week. It's okay to sometimes come out and say, I need a light lesson today. That's okay. Yeah. I got something going on in my life. What is difficult as an instructor is if somebody doesn't say that. If we don't know that, we're going to trudge on. We're going to go on and go forward. But if you're like, hey, something's going on in my life or whatever, it's fine. I do that when I do yoga. Sometimes, I'm like, today I can't do the 45 minutes sweat your guts out yoga. I got to do a real light one. You can do that with your instructor. It's important to be able to have that communication with them.
One of the fun tools I give some of my riders, I remember one woman in particular who was a lawyer, and she would get out of her job at 5:00, and literally she would be so tense, her hair would be curling and standing on end. And I told her, look, whatever problem you're trying to solve right now in your personal life, in your professional life, at your job, has to go in a black hefty bag and be left at the arena door. Mm-hmm. And it can sit there at the door for the rest of the time that you're in the ring. Mm-hmm. So your time with your horse, I don't care if it's 10 minutes, I don't care if it's 45 minutes, your time in the ring with that horse, you want to focus only on that horse because he deserves it. And it worked really well. It doesn't work with everybody, but it's just a little bit of a visual that does work with some people.
Well,
Yeah.
here's another thing you can do. You can say, you know what, I just can't handle a lesson today. I'd like to watch you ride my horse and give me tips. And I'd like to be the observer. You can learn a lot from stepping back and watching somebody ride your horse. And
Exactly.
when I ride students' horses, I show them this is the exact problem that you're having. Just because I have 30 years of experience doesn't mean the horse is just going to be perfect. Here's the problem. Here's how I solve it. And then maybe you have a more clear picture of what your instructor would like you to do. That's super useful, super helpful. And you don't have the stress of being instructed and being in the middle of a whole, whatever's going on with you mentally.
Yeah.
And sometimes just watching like that can give them the confidence that they can do this too. Sometimes when they're up against something that they don't know how to deal with, that can build anxiety, that can build fear, that can build a whole lot of emotions. But when they get on and they see you ride through it, they say, well, that really wasn't that bad, was it? So that's a really, really good tool to help your people. Let's move on, because you also touched on it a little bit. Another quality in a good or effective instructor is your communication abilities, being able to communicate in a clear and positive way that works for your students. We know everybody's different. Everybody learns differently. There's visual learners, there's analytical learners, there's kinetics, there's all sorts of stuff that people go through in order to learn. As instructors, we've got to be able to talk to all of them and in a way they understand. Another thing that you need to do, and again, in terms of building confidence, is empower them and motivate them. Show them they can do this. Explain to them how they can do this. I think being positive is a huge part of that. Back in the old days, I don't know if you guys remember when screaming was a huge part of any lesson. Thank God we have C coaches, but we were belittled. We were treated in ways that would be totally unacceptable now. But learning not to say don't do this or don't do that, learning how to put things in a positive light works much better. And when you take away all those negative words in your teaching and you take away all that judgmental kind of feeling in your teaching, it creates a much more positive learning environment for them, and they feel more comfortable with it overall.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. Let's just when you tell somebody to don't look at the car, what does your body do? You look at the car. Your body doesn't hear "don't look at the car." You hear "look at the car." So I'm looking at a car right now, but whatever it is, don't raise your right hand. So and as an instructor, you have to really focus on that, because when I heard that, I thought, oh my gosh, how many times do I say that? And I said it a lot. Now I really try to not say that. And you do have to practice it because it's so ingrained in what we do. So that's kind of where you're going with that, isn't it?
Exactly. It's give them a direction, because sometimes saying don't do something, well, they don't know what to do other than do that. You know what I'm saying? So if like I used to have a horrible habit of keeping my right leg too far back, I couldn't figure out if I just stretched it, it came forward. I kept thinking push it forward. Well, I couldn't, because it was so crammed up. But somebody finally said to me, Cindi, stretch your right leg, and that put it in a better position. Moving on from communication, an effective instructor has to be knowledgeable. There's a commitment to education, and we're not talking about just the education of others, but becoming educated yourself, which you do learn that in this program, that continuing your education is important. It's a lifetime commitment.
It's a lifetime, and it is a requirement, right, for a certified instructor. We have to do a certain number of hours of continuing education every year. It's part of what we have to do, and it's really important, and it's not an unreachable amount. I mean, you can, if you're having a clinic or something, but it is enough to say, hey, it is important to continue to learn. And it's very true. I think when you stop learning, then you're in trouble.
Exactly. And it's a science, and it's always evolving. And, I get to go listen to Hillary Clayton when she's at the convention, and every year she has something new and something that kind of makes your eyes open up. I think the most interesting part to me is the top educators in our country, the Lilos or the Garys or the Janets, they're at almost all the lectures. They're at almost all the symposiums. And they're not just sitting there to be supportive. They're asking questions and they're listening too. And you see, what they bring back from it all. They've just built this wealth of knowledge through being open-minded, that they don't yet know it all, that we'll never know it all, that there's always some new twist that we can learn from it.
Exactly. No, it's true. And there's so many resources too. I mean, you're listening to this podcast. It's a great, there are books, there's podcasts, there's lectures, there's now things on YouTube. I mean, really, you can, it's all online now. You can get it. And it's pretty, a lot of it's free and or very affordable,
Well, I think
which
at
is great.
This point, I need to plug the USDF library. It's a huge asset in terms of learning tools and videos and stuff. But there's tons of stuff out there. Part of that knowledge also needs to be the training scale. We need to talk about that a little bit, because it is the fundamental training concepts that lay the foundation for a correctly schooled horse. Without really understanding those concepts, your progress is going to stall. You can, of course, teach the horse tricks. You can teach him to make his legs move in fancy ways. But at some point, you're going to hit that wall and not be able to get the high degree of suppleness and harmony that we want to see. That's the hallmark of a highly trained dressage horse. And then being able to apply the exercises according to the training scale, being able to say, well, that horse isn't supple enough, so let's do this exercise, or that horse needs to be better engaged, so let's work a little bit on shoulder ins.
I think this is a really important, sorry, I'm just going to jump in, but it's an important point to understand, why are you doing what you're doing? Don't just ride around in patterns, and you have to use a pattern to find a hole in the training or a problem, and then apply, it doesn't matter, even if it's a 20-meter circle, you're applying your aids, you're evaluating on, what is good, what is not good, what needs to be improved. That's what an instructor helps you to do. But, not everyone is blessed to be able to ride with an instructor every day. So you're going to need to be using these tools to make your horse better through your evaluation and through focused practice.
Yeah, I think focused practice is really important. One story just comes to mind real quickly. I once went to, and this particular student has been my student now many years. When I first met her, I went to her arena. She came to my house or whatever, and she was riding an advanced horse. I mean, this was in a schooled event horse, and rider she had just come home from Europe, and she was having a lot of trouble on the flat with this horse. And she literally told me every exercise in her toolbox that she did. And that's exactly what I said to her. I said, I am so glad you know all of these exercises. This is really important. And this is all good stuff. But why do you use that exercise at each point in time? And she and I actually had a big laugh about this recently. And she's a very good rider now and has had success. But she didn't know. She just knew these exercises, and she wanted to make sure that I knew she knew. And I said, okay, that's great. But you have to have a focused approach and understand why each exercise is going to work the way they're going to work. And now she's pretty good and she knows why she's doing them. But that was a really important point, because I'd never really seen anybody do that when they just came with all these exercises. And I was like, oh wow.
Well, coming from a judging standpoint, you do kind of see that a little bit, because you'll have somebody come with you and I want to ride second level and let's work on a shoulder in. And I'm like, well, great, but the pole's not at the highest point and the horse isn't coming through from behind. I said, this horse needs to be more supple and more into your outside rein. And they think of the patterns a lot of the time. I think we're just getting to a point where people are starting to realize these exercises do have a mission, and they are just starting to realize what the purpose of each of the exercises are. And I think that's the big why for so many years people were preaching that you couldn't teach feel. Now we understand so more about the purpose of the exercises, because dressage has come so far in this country that we realize that we can teach feel if we use the exercises correctly to create a feeling in the horse and say to the rider, there, did you feel that? I think that's hugely important in understanding the exercises. I think also the final piece of knowledge is being knowledgeable and experienced enough to set realistic but challenging goals. Nobody wants to be the training level rider forever, but you also can't go so far out of their comfort zone that you blow their mind.
Yeah.
Don't take that training level and start canter pirouettes, but find the exercises that are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. And it's okay. I think people are like, oh, I've been at training level for so many years. And I'm like, well, are you ready to move on? Because it's okay to not be ready. If you're getting 80% a lot, then maybe it's time to move forward. You know what I mean? But really, at the end of the day, it's okay to stay at a level in a showing that you're comfortable. Yep. Should you be maybe pushing yourself at home? I think you should. I think that's a good time to push yourself a little bit.
Well, and again, not going crazy, but taking that training level horse and just riding a little bit more shoulder in some smaller circles, just to kind of enhance what the training level horse is doing. But yes, clearly always in the comfort zone.
Yeah.
I think we should probably move on just to get into the anatomy of the good lesson now. I think that pretty much covers, to me, what a good effective teacher, unless you guys have something to add.
No, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, so
I'm ready for what you
love this.
next.
Let's carry on.
All right. So early in the program, we were given a lecture by Lilo that was fantastic, and it very clearly spelled out a formula that I use to this day in my teaching, and it's the anatomy of a lesson. In the old days, there really wasn't a format. I mean, I'm talking back in the 80s where if somebody was a second, third level rider, they were out there teaching and they were telling you how to pull the horse's head down and wiggle the bit a little bit. And there was no talk about impulsion or engagement. There weren't words like that yet. It was mostly about riding a frame. So to hear Lilo talking that time and start to apply that forward, it was really helpful. For a lesson to succeed, something has to be learned. And using a format like this is really the path to success for me. So when we talked already about setting reasonable goals, this is where it gets applied, because obviously everybody has their long-term goals, whether to be a better stretchy circle at the end of the year or whether it's to move up a level. That's a personal thing. Working towards those goals, each of the lessons is a stepping stone. It's a smaller goal, and it's a stepping stone towards that bigger goal. We want to make sure that we give the horse adequate time to warm up. And one of the lectures I got to attend stressed the importance of walking your horse for 10 minutes before you start, just to lubricate the joints. I think Adequan used to do a lot of that in the early, they used to give us lectures on joint health and stuff. And they made it pretty clear that it takes time for those joints to lubricate. So that's the first thing my students learn about their lessons is they better be out and walking. The first part of the lesson is the warm-up phase. And what I want to see in the warm-up phase is look at all three gaits in both directions, because sometimes you see some differences. There may be some changes of direction to help assess suppleness and bendability. For a more school pair, you might add a little bit of lateral work to see how they react from the inside leg, or if there's other prerequisites for the work you're about to do, maybe transitions, you might want to just run through those to get a feel. Or if you were going to work on a half-pass zigzag that day, how is that horse's shoulder in? Assess the horse's mindset, and you've already talked about assessing the rider's mindset for that day to make sure they're capable of emotionally doing what you're about to try to do. And during that time, you should take just a minute or two to say, this is what we're going to work on today, explain why, and explain how this kind of ties into stuff if you can.
Mm-hmm.
From the warm-up phase, then we move on to the work phase, using the goals that we just set and making sure the rider and the instructor are on the same page for that. Any basics that you didn't touch on your warm-up phase, for example, in that half-pass zigzag, you want to start with just a half-pass and see how that goes. Make sure the half-passes in each direction are easy, supple, with correct bending. Does the discuss the exercise with the rider and give them a clear direction? Use the letters, go from this letter to that letter, but give them a very clear visual of where they are to go. Sometimes you need to walk the rider through it first. Then when you get into riding the exercise, don't drill it. Back from Carl McCullough, we used to hear about the rule of threes. If something doesn't improve after 3 times, then it's probably not going to. If it doesn't after 3 times, then go back to your basics and say, okay, what part of the training scale didn't happen here that I couldn't make things better? The nice thing about the limit of 3s is you're less likely to break your horse that way, because sometimes you see riders out there drilling and drilling and drilling, and they just ride the movement over and over and over, and nothing's happening. At some point, you got to say, why is it not happening? In fairness to the horse.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I think I think that's a good way to put it. The limit of 3s. Do it 3 times, and if it's not going to work, maybe take a break or assess. Sometimes I think you get so into, I'm going to get this. And then it's like, yeah, but why are you not getting, or, I mean, as a rider too, it's not, that's a good rule of thumb. 3 times, no more.
Right. But do it 3 times, because the first time could also be an accident.
Yeah, that's true.
Make sure that the student has grasped enough control over it. But that kind of does guide you to where to go with your exercises. And then when you're done with all that, you want to go back, make sure the rider understood just what happened, make sure the rider understood where to go with it next. If they're not going to see you in a bit, maybe give them some homework. And then a cool down phase where you let the horse stretch a little bit and set up the next time you're going to see them.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what Lilo took us through, which it does help a lot.
And coming also from the student perspective, right? So it's great, good instructors will run through this phase. As a student, it's okay. And I think, Cindi, you and I have just been in Florida. I'm not sure if you're still there, but where we were students as well, where we were taking lessons. And it's nice sometimes to be back in the student role, because there's times where it's okay to say to your instructor, hey, can we go back to that one half pass? Or can we go back to this one thing you said, because I didn't grasp it? And it's not, you're not doing that as, you're not being rude, right? You're just like, hey, what were we doing in that passage transition? Like, what did I do? What can I do better? Yep. That's your time in the moment, that if you have something that sort of pops in your head, it's absolutely fine to just say to your instructor, hey, can you review that right now? Or, hey, I don't have any questions right now. And maybe later when you go back to your riding journal, I mean, don't email your instructor or text your instructor at 11 o'clock at night, but the next lesson, sometimes it gets us really cranky. Actually, it'll wake me up and then I'm really cranky, but that's not the point. But the point there is, and then maybe jot it down at the beginning of your next lesson, come back and say, hey, we talked about this and I was really not clear about that. And that's okay to do that. That's a good student too. Again, pick your moment to go do it. Don't do it in the middle of, whatever. But the next time your lesson starts, or if you see your instructor, just maybe send him a text. I have a quick question on what happened. And that's a good thing. That's a good part of being a good student as well. So that your instructor can give you some good feedback.
There's got to be that communication. And if the instructor is sensing something that's not being communicated, step up, say, hey, what's going on? Yeah. But it's been a huge piece of the program that I've taken away, and I've really enjoyed the process. I'm looking forward to learning more and moving on. I am a student. I mean, I take lots of lessons.
Yeah, well, you have to. Yeah, absolutely.
You never stop. Well, you never stop, and you need
never stop. I love it. Well, Cindi, thank you so much for coming on tonight. It's been fantastic. How can our listeners find you online?
Well, thank you again. You can find me online either at cindywylie.com. If you Google me, my name, it comes up. It's Cindi with 2 I's. The other place is you can find me on Facebook. My Facebook is just my name, Cindi Wylie.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Cindi. And again, congratulations on your certification. That is phenomenal.
Thank you. And thank you for setting the way for us.
I warmed him up for you. No, it was great. Congratulations.
Take care. Thank you.
Bates Saddles. Bates Saddles are the saddle brand that truly puts your horse first. Enjoy comfort, optimum balance, and seamless contact with your horse, leaving you free to concentrate on your aids. Consider the new Bates Artiste Dressage Saddle. It features a movable Flexicontour block, adjustable ergonomic stirrup bar, and luxe leather. The new Bates Artiste Dressage Saddle has a position so natural and a connection so sensitive that the saddle all but disappears and your performance is amplified. Let's hear what Allie Saxon, the United States eventer, has to say about it.
I really liked the streamline look that it gave. I love the Advanta, and I love the close contact of the Advanta, and I saw very similar features in this saddle as the Advanta had, so I was really excited to see how it felt once I sat in it. Sitting in it, I liked the close contact feel that it gave it right away. With the Webbers, it also gave the ability to kind of really wrap your leg around without having any interference. Right away, the balance felt super, very comfortable. The panels were nice and soft on my thigh. Everything about the saddle was clearly well thought through, and as a rider, it's nice to sit down in a saddle that feels designed not just for you, but also for the horse's comfort.
Learn all about Bates Saddles at batessaddles.com. That's batessaddles.com.
The Podcast is North America's most listened to horse show inspired podcast with over 200 episodes. Hosted by me, Piper Clem, publisher of the Plaid Horse magazine. Listen in to hear guests which include Olympic equestrians, top hunter jumper and equitation riders, trainers, vets, farriers, horse show managers, and industry insiders discussing topics that matter: horsemanship, collegiate riding, the state of our sport, and horse show how-tos for riders at every level. One episode each month is devoted to the mental side of your ride with nationally recognized mental skills coach and author Tanya Johnston. You will also hear insider stories about how the Plaid Horse magazine comes together every month.
Well, tonight we are really honored to have Sabine Schut-Kery. She is a candidate for the Tokyo Olympics riding Sanceo. I got to meet her in Florida and I just had to have her on the podcast. Sabine, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is very exciting for me. Thank you.
We are thrilled. And, you know, we chatted a little bit in Florida, and you're just such a kind person, and I love your story and I love your horse. And so I wanted to just have you on the show to tell us a little bit about your history and yourself and your horse. So I'll let you start with your history. Tell us a little bit about who is Sabine.
Okay, well, I was born and raised in Germany, and looking back, I mean, that's really great that I got my education with the horses there, and just how the country, the geography is, being a smaller country, really gave me the opportunity to experience a lot as a younger kid and teenager, to learn a lot around the horses, because I could just ride my bike to the barn, and, you know, it was more like being together with other kids and growing really up around horses and become horsewomen. So I did my riding, obviously, in Germany, and I was lucky that when I was about 16 and growing too tall for the ponies, I was lucky to ride some Friesians and Andalusians, and learned early on kind of a little bit different stuff like riding in side saddle, or I learned how to drive a four-in-hand, and to learn how to ride one horse and long line it in the front of me from the saddle, a second horse. So just things like that. And
really well-rounded education you were getting.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, at the time you think that's normal, but as I grow older, I look back and really I understand even more, though, how special that was, and how much it, you know, taught me to be intuitive with animals. And I think it really reflects, I want to say, in my performance too, because like doing so many exhibitions also where you don't have to ride from letter to letter and from movement to movement as you have to do in a competition, you start listening a lot to your horse. When is a good moment to present this or that in your horse? And it's a little bit more of a feel riding because it's not quite as restricted. Then on the other hand, I'm very grateful that I dipped so deeply into the competition riding because I'm fascinated by this high degree of throughness that a horse has to have that you do have to do Saturday afternoon at 3:36, write a test from letter to letter. And there is no room, it has to happen. So I think looking back, it's both such amazing experiences, and I love mixing what I learned from both, mixing that together and make it Sabine, make it me. And so that was the first thing that came to my mind when you asked, who am I? I think that's really, looking back, I'm very, very grateful for that. And then just to not make it too long, you tell me if I'm going too far out. But
no, we love it. We love hearing your story. Okay. It's phenomenal.
Okay. Then in 1998, I sold my first horse, which was a Frisian stallion that I had trained. I sold him to a gentleman in the U.S. in Texas, and I sold him from a video as a breeding stallion, but then I wanted to see where he goes. And so I flew over, and the gentleman's name is Jim Mosebrook, and he offered me a job on the spot. And I just had met my husband, and he came with me. So in 1998, we moved to the U.S. I was lucky enough that Jim also got me my citizenship really quickly. We traveled through the whole U.S., which was amazing. My first exhibition, because I also taught my horses how to lay down and sit on command. They can rear on command, just as an interesting movements for the crowd that they like to see, besides the dressage movements. So my first exhibition in the U.S. was at Madison Square Garden. So coming from Europe, that was just mind-blowing. And they put sand up on the Rockefeller Center for the Today Show, and we had to ride there. I mean, imagine coming from Europe. That's pretty cool. So I remember
that's so cool.
That was just like really, really amazing. Not ever been to the U.S. So then we traveled a lot through the U.S. and tried to promote the Frisian horse, also as a dressage horse, and not being so stuck on the breed, but saying, hey, dressage means training. So, these horses, yes, they weren't bred for dressage, but they have a lot of things to offer too.
Well, I have to jump in here and just and tell you, Sabine, that you were kind of an inspiration for me as well, because in the early to the late 2000s, I can't remember what the years were, I got a Frisian stallion in my barn for training, and it was great for me to be able to have somebody to look up to, or to say, I'm riding a Frisian, and I was probably the only Frisian at a dressage show, but I was like, other people do it too, just not around here, I think I've seen video of you riding the stallions, and you did such a beautiful job, and that's who you were. Who I was emulating to be like. So this is personally, this is a really great interview for me to be involved with.
Yeah, no, and it was just wonderful times. But I think also what I want to share, and even for younger upcoming riders, even when we did the demonstrations, we were even in Germany or here, I did tell my boss at the time, I said, look, we can't just do exhibitions because, there might be, if you want to promote this breed, we also have to make sure they're to some degree competitive, and, make it also a little bit, show it from the serious side. So with that being said, I'm touching a little bit on that it was always in me and our group of riders and kids in Germany. We always wanted to do it correct. It wasn't just the how do you say that, the excitement of riding in front of a clapping crowd. It wasn't about that. It was really doing a good job, but combining it, with the movements like the laying down and rearing and doing the dressage movements and doing side saddle and all these things. And just it. And why did we do that? Because this gentleman where the pony club was and the other part of the barn was a gentleman that wanted to promote Frisian horses and Spanish horses in Germany. And so promoting them was also showing them. I mean, we did exhibitions in Stuttgart in the break during the dressage shows, and or Aachen, all the big shows. And so that's what we did a little bit. And then in 2005, I moved to California, and then I would say real business maybe started, in the sense I wasn't working for someone anymore, but I was had my own business. So there was, single horses coming in. And I tried a little bit with the Frisians, but there's not always that liberty of picking. Like when I worked for this gentleman, he let me obviously pick and choose the horses. And as you know, again, they weren't necessarily bred for dressage, especially back then. So it wasn't always the right horse. And then this is also something that's close to my heart. When I feel the horse has a hard time in it, but also really, how do I say that? When I really feel they don't like doing it, then I'm not going to force a horse to do that. But I explain to the owner, every horse has its place. So we need to find what this horse is good for. And for some reason, I never really came across another good one that I thought would be a good fit. And I started slipping slowly into warm bloods, which was great. And
slipping into warm bloods. It's a funny.
Yeah. And looking back now, I mean, what an amazing journey. I mean, to go from that to traveling pretty much the world with doing demonstrations, but now touching into the competitive world to that extent is just mind-blowing for me. I mean, I'm just really have to pinch myself. Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
No, continue. I was just going to say, when did you meet Sanceo?
So actually, Sanceo's owners, Alice Womble-Heitman and Dr. Mike Heitman, they are from Texas, from the Houston area, from Hempstead. They have Horsegate Ranch there. And it was actually really touching because Alice always saw me do my demonstrations with the Frisians and the Andalusians. And she always took a moment and came to me and told me how beautiful it was. So there was always a connection. And when I moved to California, I mean, literally a week after, she called me and she said, would you be interested in training one of my horses? Because she thought I was only, working for Proud Meadows. So there was a, little bit, I mean, I would have been open. But anyway, so I said, yes, let's do it. So I got Cacique from her, which was a little bit of a troublemaker when I first got him. He was a stallion, and he had a lot of his own ideas, but he was also a great challenge for me and I'm looking for the word. I learned so much from him, and he learned from me. So it was great, and I was able to bring him up the levels and qualified him for Gladstone, showed him in the CDIs. And then Alice said to me one day, she was so happy with what I've done with Cacique. And she said, well, I wonder, my gosh, what you would do with a horse that you got from the beginning. And she said, let's get a young one. and let's see. So then she sent me to Germany, but she was going to come, and her family were going to come too. But at that year, there was a hurricane and they couldn't leave. So I went by myself, and I went a week, and I couldn't find anything. And Sanceo was the last horse on the list. And I really just fell in love with him. It was easy. He was just, people always ask me, what did you like when you bought him? Because he was just under 3. We saw him in October. And so he was just getting ready to be under saddle. When I saw him, he was only 3 times under saddle. So I did not want to get on. But I saw him on the lunge line, and he was just so rhythmic. Like, I was just blown away going on that small circle, how powerful and how rhythmic he was going, one step like another at that age. And then obviously his gaits. Alice loves beautiful horses, so she kind of did whisper in my ear, try to make sure it's a pretty horse too. So he definitely fit the bill there, which I first thought, oh my gosh, that's even harder, to find talent and the looks. So. Yeah, and then I told her, hey, I think I did see something that I really like, but I need to ride it. I don't want us to get into this not feeling it. And since I didn't come the first trip, we waited 3 weeks and we went back, and I got on, and he had exactly that feeling that I saw, this like one step like another. And I've talked about rhythm, but with the rhythm, it's also the balance, how balanced he was. And I think that still shows a lot, like that same step, and obviously the quality in the gaits, but that good natural balance that he had. Yeah, and that's how Sanceo's and my story started. And I can only say, I'm starting now too with young horses, and I'm trying to always remind people in the horse world that, yes, of course, Grand Prix is amazing. And, even to where I am with Sanceo right now, that's obviously really, really amazing for me, at least. But when you bring a horse along the levels, there's a lot of fun things too. So I really try to purchase or buy something also when there are 3 or 4, so I can do young horse classes. And even with Sanceo, looking back, how amazing. Like, he qualified as a 5-year-old for Pferden for the World Breeding Championships to represent the U.S. We decided not to go. He was a little immature, and we didn't want to, because we wanted to go to Grand Prix. We said, hey, let's not just look at this year, look in the future. And in order to be competitive, we would have to push a little bit and make him a little more flashy. And I said, I don't want that. I want to stay honest to the training. And he wasn't mature enough to push him a little more for that. And then when he was 6, we had the same. So he qualified again for Pferden for the World Breeding Championships. And that's when we thought, hey, he's much more mature. And I remember just also wanting to do that trip to give him an experience of what it means to travel overseas, to cope with, being showgrounds in Europe that are way more busy and more cramped in than some of ours. So that was really also a reason why we wanted to do that trip. So as a component to do for his development as a Grand Prix horse, to do one of those trips. And then what did I do then? Then we did developing Prix St. George, which was really fun, and he won Chicago with a really high score. And then after that, we went the first time to Florida with him and did the national regular Prix St. George. And then the year after that, I think, was right away the Pan Am year where I started doing CDIs. small tour. And he was on the short list, and the short list went to Europe. And then he ended up being on the team, which was, amazing. And then the whole experience in Toronto.
We
And
saw
then
you
we
there,
went on,
Phil and
but-
I. We saw you there. We were there. We were in the stands screaming for you.
Oh, well, that was amazing. And but that's what I was just trying to list real quick in the sense of how cool is that? I mean,
So
it doesn't, and not every horse always makes it to Grand Prix, and we shouldn't be upset by that. As I say, every horse has its place, and there is enough things we can enjoy in the journey. And so that's a little bit, I would say, our story. And Sanceo is, a 15-year-old.
It's so cool.
Hanoverian
15 years
stallion.
together. Wow.
Yeah. Well, 12, right? Because we got him.
12 years. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So now the Olympics, I mean, you did Pan Ams, and now looking forward to the Olympics in a few months. What happens now? So we're kind of recording middle of April. So what happens now? What's the plan in the next few months getting ready for Tokyo?
Yeah. So, I mean, we do have to obviously qualify and all of that. So in short, it's pretty much the end of April is the ending of the qualifying period. So we still have a couple of CDIs coming, I think Tryon and Ocala, I believe, where, horses still can compete. And then we have on the West Coast this week coming Rancho Murrieta. It's also a CDI and a qualifier. But end of April, they will announce a short list. Usually the short list goes to Europe, but because of the herpes virus, that's too risky, and I think that's very smart to not do that. So instead, there will be an observation event in June in Wellington, and where the short list is going to compete. And they like a little bit having it in the climate that's probably close to Tokyo, or the closest that we have in the country. And then from that show on, they will determine the team. This year we have only a three-rider team, where normally it has been often enough 4 riders. So 3 riders and 1 traveling reserve. But the difference this time, I think it's the first time they're doing that format, that there is an option in Tokyo if for whatever reason, maybe a horse doesn't deal well with the heat or something in that nature. I believe the alternate horse can be brought in for the special, which the Grand Prix special determines is for the team medal. So,
interesting.
I think
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I think the alternate rider this year has a little bit more, hopefully also fun, because it's obviously a tough spot to be in, because I think most of the time you're there until the jog, and after the jog, unfortunately, you have to kind of go in your room and wait.
Yes.
I mean, it's okay. I mean, I just, I think it's probably going to be a little more exciting. So, but anyways, that's what it looks like. And what I'm just trying to do is sit tight.
Yes.
And make sure, to look at it as, best case scenario that I am going, because if I am, I need to be ready and not, not be ready. So, and that for me means my horse is quite seasoned, I feel. He has a, kind of age and competition mileage of a more seasoned Peking horse. So for me, it's important that I don't override him, and that I keep him happy, and especially not just happy, I think happy and motivated. And how do I do that? Well, I would love to ride every day, because there's so many things I want to work on, but really hold myself back and keep things how they are, improve what little things I need to improve on and I need to touch up on, and stay competition fit, both mentally and physically, and actually both him and I, because it's for me the same, and we can't forget that. And for me personally, it's mentally and healthy. I mean, I do have to work out and stay fit and sharp, and then try to do cross training and try to do, he goes out 3-4 times a day, and he has his own aqua tread. So I also try to do, today was aqua tread day. So I'm not riding 5 days a week. And
he's getting a little variety in his work. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Lots of hand grazing. Right now, I will say I don't turn him loose out, which he has been all his life, and I'm big on turnout. And I always thought, when I read about other Grand Prix riders, I always thought, they should turn out. Mm-hmm. But being the first time in that place, it's just scary. I can't help it. And I keep telling him, honey, you're going to, and he has been turned out 7 days a week. But I keep telling him he's going to have the most beautiful retirement too with Alice.
Yes.
But, lots of hand grazing. He gets at least an hour hand grazing. And, I turn him loose in our round pen, so he definitely can roll and, jump around if he has to. Yeah, so that's a little bit what I'm trying to do. And, stay on the game, but don't overdo it. And that's a fine line. And that everybody has to ask that themselves. There's no recipe, and there's a risk to it, because how much is too much, and how much is not enough. That kind of, it's nerve-wracking for everybody, but you just got to stay. What I try to do when you're questioning that, I just try to ask myself, well, what got you here? That gut feeling. I trained him. Yeah. What did you do before? You also didn't ride 5 days a week, and you did variety before too.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine that's really, it's a hard time period. It's a few weeks, but it's like, oh goodness, it's hard. And coming off of Wellington, where there's a lot of pressure and a lot of heat, and I can imagine it's a hard time for sure.
And I think it's quite interesting to ride at that level, because it comes down to this kind of management. Your horse knows everything. Yes, there's always things to improve, absolutely. But I think the biggest question I have now, asking myself always, well, how many days before the show? How do I lead up to it? What do I do in between the show days? If like the last show, it was so spread out. We had Tuesday the Grand Prix and Saturday the special. So what do you do in between? And it's, lots of hours in the stall, more than at home, because I don't have the option, hand grazing.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hand graze
during
there,
the day.
really.
There is no, exactly. And so I think that's a whole new chapter of where you have to have confidence and and play around and learn by mistakes,
Yeah.
And with him,
Sure.
You just learn it by doing it, and I shouldn't maybe have said by mistakes, learning by doing it, because, like my little strategy also was, I showed November the last time, and then I was showing the 5-star. So the 5-star was a big show for me. So the week prior, I took him Saturday into a national class just to see what I have. So those little strategy plans. And looking back, talking about making good decisions, I was like, wow, that was a really good decision you made. And I can tell you hundreds of bad decisions.
Yeah.
It's an animal, he's a stallion, so I have to watch a little bit also. Here in Wellington, I'm sure it's a little bit also with the heat. He was perfect gentleman. In Thermal in November, it was quite cold, he was hot. I mean, really like Stylish.
He was ready to go.
And I had I had to deal a little bit with that too. And you have to remember that. And that's what I mean with the management. You just have to think a lot. I also write a lot of things down so I can look back. Okay, if I showed in a colder climate, I look back how many days, what did I do? And then in a more warmer climate, or if I have a couple shows close to each other, what did I do in the middle? I mean, just to...
That's a great tip.
Enrich. Yeah, just to, you know, in the end in your head what you want to do. But still, it's always interesting to just read a little bit back. And there's always a little thing I may forget.
Yeah. No. Oh, I love it. Well, Sabine, we could keep you on air all night. Your story is so amazing. And hearing what you have done with Sanceo and just the whole journey is didn't happen overnight. And it's so fun to hear it. And but how can we find you online? Tell us about your sponsors. We'd love to hear all that.
Okay. First of all, I really my gosh, there is never enough thank yous and gratitude to Sanceo's owners that I can even share this journey with them and their horse. And so that's, Horsegate Ranch in Texas, in Hempstead, and that is Alice Womble and Dr. Mike Heidman. And my online, so my website is Sabine Schut-Kery, www.sabineschutkery.com. And I have an amazing village behind me of companies, but also friends and products I strongly believe in that support me with Sanceo and our journey. And I would love to tell you about them. So it's Platinum Performance, a really, really high-end supplement company out of California. I have Röckel Equestrian, super quality riding gloves out of Germany. Cast Sports for my helmet. The Horse and Rider Boutique that has always beautiful clothing. And I have a very dear saddle supporter, the N2 Saddlery, which I love that saddle. Dressage sport boots, MDC stirrups, US Animal, Anique shirts. See you at X Tack Store, and I love Looper Feet, the Nero boots, Equine Original Products, Dara James design for the beautiful stock ties. And Lux Heavenly Bodies for really important sunscreen for us riders riding always outside. So I really, really thank all these amazing sponsors.
Absolutely. Well, Sabine, thank you so much for coming on. We are going to be cheering you on your journey to Tokyo, and fingers crossed. And thank you for sharing your story with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. Thank you.
Well, tonight, just in time for spring, we have Elizabeth Hoeflein. She is the general manager at Hahn Plastics. Elizabeth, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back. How are you guys?
We are great. And you have the solution to most of horse farm owner problems in the spring, don't you?
I do, yes. Everyone who is rich in mud out there, I have a solution for you.
Oh, tell, please.
So it's a 100% recycled plastic grid that you put right down on top of the mud, and your horses will be up and out of the mud and happier than ever. It's, like I said, it's made of 100% recycled plastic. It's 50 by 50 centimeters or 19 and 5/8 by 19 and 5/8 inches. And you just put it down and leave it in place, and that's it.
So tell us a little bit more about the installation. So you've got, you go and you pick up your grids. They're not light, but one person, one person can do it. You demonstrate. You came over to our farm and you demonstrated how easy it was. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So when I came over to your place, we found a nice muddy gate area. And we just brought down the mud control grids and wheelbarrow and put them right down on top of the mud, just one row at a time. They just slide into one another. They've got tabs on all four sides. So you do your first row, and then you work on the second row and push them into the tabs on the first row, and you just keep going, as many or as few as you want. And that's it. Typically, there is no ground preparation needed at all. And personally, I think they actually work better when you put them down right in the mud rather than when it's dry.
Yeah, and so horse people might recognize kind of the system of interlocking if they've installed any kind of rubber matting within their barn, and it's very similar. It's just the mud control grids have holes in them. So how big are the holes? How's that designed?
Yep. So the holes are actually 2 inches in diameter. So if you're using them with smaller animals, maybe goats, or even with dogs, we do recommend that you would fill those holes. The nice thing about installing them on the mud is that some of that mud will actually fill up the holes, so there's not as big a gap. And eventually that mud will dry, and that's actually what holds the mud. Actually holds these grids together because they don't lock, and that also makes it a lot easier to take them back up in the summer if you choose to take them up, if you install them temporarily.
So do they sink in the mud, or do they hang on out on top?
So they technically will float, but typically in the mud, the more you put down, they support each other. So because it creates a larger surface area, they stay on top. They don't sink down into the mud. You won't lose them into that endless mud pit that everybody seems to have.
Oh, that is awesome. Now, do you need to cut them?
So you don't need to cut them, but if you'd like square edges, because typically when you lay 2 rows or more, you would stagger them. So you'll have a half a grid further out in the second row or further in on the second row. You can cut them in half. It's really easy to cut them with a circular saw or something similar to that. Just remember to use a wide tooth blade, so a blade that has fewer teeth, because that way you'll cut through the plastic rather than melt your way through it, which you don't want. That's going to make a mess. But you don't have to cut them. It's just if you're wanting a certain look or if you're fitting them into a certain square or rectangular area that you can cut them.
So how tough are they? Like if I have some Clydesdales around the farm or something like that, is there a concern for how much weight is getting put on them?
There's not. So you're always putting these down on the ground, so they're always fully supported. The grids can handle 5.6 tons per square foot. So Clydesdales are not an issue. Tractor is not an issue. There's a video out there of a dump truck full of gravel driving over them. It's absolutely not a problem. They're 15 pounds each, so these are sturdy pieces of plastic that you're putting down to get your horses out of the mud, and won't get your tractor stuck either because it's going to support those as well.
So, Liz, when you're feeding or you're out, are they slippery? Like, do you have to worry about going down? Because in the mud, I mean, I'm sure all of us on this call have bit it on the mud. So I certainly have, and there's just not very many pleasant words that are said and probably some tears involved. I'm just saying from a friend.
So these are not flat on the top. They do have a textured surface, so that does help with traction. We do always recommend to put what we call a tread layer on top. So something like sand or grit, just to give a little bit more traction. And it's especially important if you've got shod horses, just because of that metal on top of plastic will be more slippery than if they're barefoot. And we always say to introduce your horses to these grids once they've been put in place, just so they know what they're about to step on. Maybe have them on a lead and just walk them across so they know it's safe and they're not spooked by it.
Yeah, and in my experience, we actually took a little extra gravel and made a gravel kind of layer on top because the horses are a little bit kind of nervous, conscientious about them. So when we first put them down, they were, like Liz said, we put them around the gate area and they wanted to jump the grids every time. So with a little gravel, they're like, oh, okay, it's fine. And now, they're really, really very used to them. But that would be my recommendation for people because the horses, they're suspicious.
Yeah. And Liz, like at the end of the season, if you were to pull them up, or let's say you were to leave them down in the summer, how do you clean them?
So you can just clean them with a regular shovel, or if you've you've got a piece of equipment with a bucket on top, you can just use the bucket on it. But because it is textured, I would say just to leave that bucket raised a little bit, like to the highest point of the texturing, just so you're not going to damage the grids when you drag your bucket across it. But they are pretty sturdy things. You shouldn't have any issue keeping them clean. There are loads of videos out there. If you take a look at the website that we have specifically for this product, you'll actually see videos of people cleaning them off.
That is so cool, because I live in central Kentucky in the spring, which means when it's sunny and beautiful, it's great, but it rains a lot. So how do I get my hands on these bad boys?
Yeah, so we are selling through a network of distributors. Again, if you go to our website, it's mudcontrolgrid.ca. You can hit the Contact Us form, and we'll let you know which distributor is the nearest to you. We do also have distributors that ship nationwide, or there are also distributors where you can go in and pick up however many grids you need.
That is fantastic. So one more time, what's the website?
It's mudcontrolgrid.ca.
Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to get my hands on these bad boys. I'm starting to really need them. So Liz, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Phil, as you know, I actually just got a new pair of stability stirrup leathers because I needed one on my other saddle. I just couldn't stand it anymore. We were changing them and I couldn't do it. And we just love these leathers. We wear them all the time, and that's no joke. And you can really tell if you go from having a saddle with the stability stirrup leathers to not just normal, nope, it's not going to work. So I really like my stirrup leathers, and I went ahead and got another pair.
I thought you had them on all of your saddles. I do. So, it's worth the investment. They're not super duper expensive, and they're going to last you. We've been wearing them with the other, and I haven't had to change them or worried about the stretching. It's just really quality products coming from Total Saddle Fit, and you guys should check them out at totalsaddlefit.com.
Well, we have a great Total Saddle Fit tip of the week from newly USDF certified instructor, FEI certified instructor, Bill McMullin.
This week's dressage training tip is brought to you by Total Saddle Fit, home of the shoulder relief girth at totalsaddlefit.com.
Well, tonight for our Total Saddle Fit tip of the week, we have Bill McMullin. He is USDF, one of the newest FEI certified instructors, and he's also an S judge. Bill, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Reese. Nice to talk to you again.
We're happy to have you, and you have a great tip for us this week. What do you have?
Well, in our previous conversation, we're talking about the education program and the certification, and then also the judging program. So just wanted to, in terms of thinking about presenting yourself in the show ring and show that you have good training and to help improve your scores, is to think a lot about how we ride corners. Of course, accuracy and good geometry is of utmost importance, as we know, to putting the horse in the better balance at the level required, and to help improve the scores. So one thing to think about just in terms of corners, because a lot of people I'll see sometimes at lower levels, people try to ride such deep corners that the horse can't maintain the balance or the rhythm or the connection to get through the corner. So they need to ride a corner that's appropriate for the level. So a good guideline or a rule of thumb is that at training and second level, a corner can be ridden as though it were a quarter of a 10-meter circle. And moving up to third and fourth level, you can think of the corner can be more equivalent to the quarter of an 8-meter volte. And pre-St. George and above at the FEI levels, that corner could be ridden more toward the quarter of a 6-meter volte in terms of how deep and precise that the corner is. So, and it also has a little bit to do with the size of the horse and the age. I think, again, especially say a young horse, a 4 or 5-year-old horse doing a training level test, I'm going to give somebody credit if they ride the corner appropriately. Maybe it's even rounded out, possibly even more than the part of a 10-meter circle. If it's a really, a really large young horse and that needs its balance, I give that rider credit for doing what's appropriate for the horse at that time, rather than for them to try to overface the horse and ride a deep corner where it's going to lose balance and, be against the bit and so on, and lose the rhythm possibly even. So I think it's common sense in terms of that it's appropriate for the level and the horse and the right time.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in with a little tip on corners as well, because I'm watching the horses go and have watched them all winter, and we're kind of preparing for show season. For those younger horses and the maybe inexperienced riders, I have to always remind them that the short sides are straight lines as well. I just hate to see corners that are connected a little bit too much on that short side, and then the riders aren't
right.
Doing a corner, balancing, doing another corner. It's a short kind of couple of strides, maybe not
right.
Too many strides, but
yes.
Yeah, but I like to see the horses do a corner and go straight, do another corner and go straight. I think that's just something that people fail to do, is just to keep riding the bend of the corner, all the way across the short side, and then maybe even all the way down the long side as well.
No, the corner is a place to balance and rebalance the horse for whatever the wood is coming up in the next movement. But again, like I just stress that it's appropriate for the level and for the age and the size of the horse. It can make some difference too.
Well, and two, you also need to know your test, right? Because when you start a 20-meter circle, the corner, there is a corner before you start the circle. Let's say you're starting it at A, but once you start at A, the next time you'll go toward a corner, you're technically on the 20-meter circle, right? So you're not supposed to be riding the corner. That's why it's really important to know your test.
So that has to show a difference. Yeah, for sure.
I know a lot of people that'll just kind of cruise in and they're going through the corner, but they're supposed to be on a 10 or 15 meter circle or whatever. Right. So that's why kind of knowing and understanding the geometry of your test, because as a judge, also as a trainer, I think your trainer will be like, what are you doing? But as a judge, you're going to mark off for that in the geometry section. And that's just sort of giving points away when you just need to know.
And going along with that, especially what you just said, Reese, is really important, especially like in our new training level test 3, we trot at C and immediately it starts the serpentine. So immediately you're starting on the arc of a 20-meter circle. You're not going to the corner. So, and that's the combination of making the transition at C and immediately then being on that line and not falling more to the corner is a really important aspect of having the correct start to the serpentine. And that takes some skill and balance to be able to do that in the right way.
Yeah,
and then
for sure.
Then the serpentines go on along with what you're talking with the 20-meter circles that goes on to second level with our counter serpentines and so on. That how many times as judges do we write that serpentines do not have corners?
Yeah, it's a huge thing, right? Like but in that right there, right? You've already lost a point or maybe two, depending on how bad your geometry is, and that's exactly. Don't do that. You make sure that geometry is good. That's really important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. Good geometry. It's there for a reason.
Right. So really quickly,
to put the horse better on our aids.
I loved the chart. So training in first level, can you just go back through just kind of go back through that chart one more time? So everybody's got it.
Like training through second level, the corner should be equivalent to about the quarter of a 10-meter circle. Third and fourth level, equivalent to the quarter of an 8-meter volte, and at the FEI levels can be equivalent to a 6-meter volte, the quarter of a 6-meter volte.
Fantastic. Well, I'm putting that on. We have a quote board in the barn, and that is going on it tomorrow or maybe tonight when I get night check. That's a great tip. Very, very good. Well, Bill, thank you so much for staying on for our Total Saddle Fit Tip of the Week. How can our listeners find you online?
We're online at WarrenMcMullinDressage.com. And I'm on Facebook, Warren McMullin Dressage, and also have a personal page, Bill McMullin, as well on Facebook.
Well, fantastic.
I look forward to hearing from people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your tip. Well, as always, we love email and Facebook shout outs. Keep them coming. We love questions. Anything. We really like it all, don't we, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to get these questions because sometimes they really make us think, and it's fun to answer them on the show, and it's great to interact with our listeners. That's a big part of what gives us satisfaction for doing this podcast each week.
Exactly. So keep them coming. And just a reminder, because we're going to be working on our book review reviewer in the next couple weeks. Don't forget, our book club of the month is How Two Minds Meet: The Mental Dynamics of Dressage by Beth Baumert. And we want to be getting into this book, so everybody get into it. The United States Dressage Federation is your connection to dressage education, competition, and achievement. Visit usdf.org for more information. That's usdf.org, the online destination for dressage. As always, you can find our show notes and links to today's guests on our website, dressageradio.com. Like us on Facebook, just search Dressage Radio Show. Follow us on Twitter at Horse Radio. My website is maplecrestfarmky.com. You can always find me at my email, which is reese@horseradionetwork.com.
I think the best place to find me is on Facebook, or my email is philip@horseradionetwork.com. I'd like to thank our sponsors for allowing us to put on a good show. That's Kentucky Performance Products, Bates Saddles, Han Plastics, and TotalSaddleFit.com. Don't forget to check out all the other shows on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com.
Everybody, keep your heels down and your shoulders back, and we can't wait to talk to you next week.